it's me, Miss Rowe. I hope you're having an awesome day and an even awesomer week. And I've got a pretty cool art project for you today. I call it Patchwork Animals. So if you don't know what patchwork means, oh, hello, Boo. If you don't know what patchwork means, patchwork basically means something that is comprised of various different things. So if you were making like a quilt, then that's kind of like a patchwork quilt because you're using a lot of different fabrics. But you can also be used for color as well. So basically what I'm going to show you today is how you can take an outline of any animal that you want. I just got this online by Googling outline of wolf, and then using multiple colored pieces of construction paper, and how you can basically put those together to make your own patchwork animal. And what's cool is that you'll have enough pieces to where if you want to make multiple different versions of it, you can. I mean, again, I just glued mine on the very middle, but you can always put multiple ones on the same page. It's up to you, but I'm excited to show you. Also, side note, if you have not watched the our video, when I say our video, I mean art and music, me and Miss Whitman and Miss McLaughlin's video about the virtual art celebration video, please go watch that. It's on the related arts page, basically where you find all of your related arts enrichment activities, including this one. What do you want? So just go ahead, go on there, watch it. Essentially, we want to get submissions from everybody if we can, if you want to be included in the video. There's a Google form where you can submit some of your work. And also, if you want, you can just send it to my email or to Miss Whitman's email like you always have. But please go watch that video. It'll explain it a little bit better than me, and also give you the deadline for it. So anyway, on to the video. For materials that you're going to need, you'll want a few pieces of color construction paper. You don't need this many. You just need maybe like 3 or 4 different colors, but you can do as many as you want. You're also going to want some scissors, of course, to be able to cut up that paper. And you're also going to want a pencil and an eraser if you need it. As for paper that you're going to be gluing your construction paper on, if you have cardstock, it would be better. But again, just use whatever paper that you have available to you. The other thing you're going to need is an outline of an animal. So all I did was Google outline of a bear, but you can also Google outline of a raven, outline of a cat, outline of a fish. And if you can't print it out, you can always just trace it very carefully over the computer screen if you need to, but if you can print it out, it'd be a little bit more helpful. Once you have everything that you need, go ahead and pick out, again, like I said, 3 or 4 colors that you feel like would go pretty well together. It's kind of nice to have some colors that are lighter and some colors that are darker, because I just think that they sort of contrast against each other a little bit better. The next thing you're going to want to do is to take your outline of your animal, in my case, the bear, and one of your sheets of paper. So you're going to want to basically trace the outline of your animal on every single construction sheet of paper. However, before you jump into doing that, one thing you want to ask yourself is, which direction do you want your animal to face? Personally, I want my animal to face right, so when I'm tracing, I'm going to be tracing the opposite way, which is with it facing to the left. This isn't an essential step you have to do, but I find that it helps it make it look a bit neater later. So again, I'm tracing my animal the opposite way that I would like it to be. You can trace it through a window like you saw earlier, or if you really can't see through it, maybe you have too dark of a sheet of paper, then you can also go ahead and actually cut out the outline of the animal from the paper that you printed out. If you aren't able to print out the paper, this step is just a little bit more difficult, but you can try to overcome it by just making the brightness on your computer go up really, really high. But if you're able to cut it out, just like I did here, then that's a little bit easier. Once you've cut it out, you're just, again, like you did earlier, tracing it onto every single sheet of paper. But remember, if you want to face to the right, then you want to make sure that you flip it over and have it face towards the left, which is, again, not essential, but I think it does help it look a little bit neater later. So when you're going ahead and tracing your outline of your animal, one important thing to keep in mind is that you always want to have one of your hands near the place that you're tracing, just basically to make sure that none of the paper ends up kind of flying up and you don't lose your place. You always want to make sure that one hand is firmly holding the paper on top. Whether you decide that you want to trace around your outline you cut out, or if you're able to just do it all with your window or on your computer, either way, just make sure that you do your very best to make the cleanest outline possible on all of your construction paper sheets. Once you've got all of them traced on your paper, which I now have, you're going to want to take your scissors and you're going to actually want to start cutting out all of your different outlines as neatly as possible. My advice is to just take your time and just try to be as neat as possible as you can with it. Once you've gone ahead and cut out all of your different outlines of your animals on your colored sheets, then go ahead and take your base sheet, your white sheet, preferably cardstock, and you're going to want to outline your animal one more time, except you want to actually outline it the way that you want it to be facing for the final one. So again, if you've had your animal facing left on all the other tracings that you've done, then this time you want to have it facing right. So again, like I said earlier, I want my bear to be facing right, so that's why it's facing right on this sheet of paper, because this is going to be the base sheet of paper we're going to paste all of the other colored papers on. So once you've got all of your colored pieces cut out, you're going to want to go ahead and try to overlap them on top of each other and line them up together as closely as possible. Of course, there's going to be some little areas where maybe you cut the paper a little bit too much, or maybe you didn't cut it quite enough as other papers, and that's honestly okay. It's not a huge deal unless it's like a really big piece, which in this case, at that point, you could just go ahead and cut off that extra little bit. But just judging from what I did so far, I think that if it looks like mine does, then it's totally fine. So the next part you're going to do is you're going to want to think about how you want to cut up your animal. So you can basically go ahead and draw it on with your pencil first and kind of plan it out, or you could just go ahead and take your scissors and just go for it and just cut out some different areas. It depends on how careful you want to be about it. There's not really a right or a wrong way to do it. I wouldn't cut a bunch of super tiny pieces because they can be kind of hard to catch up with, but it's really up to you what you want to do. For me, I decided to go ahead and just draw my lines on there so you can kind of see what I was thinking. Again, there's several pieces, but they're not really super tiny pieces. So once you've figured that out, you're going to want to, again, try to do your very best to hold all the papers together, and then take your scissors and you're going to just follow along the lines that you drew, or again, if you're just kind of going for it, just slowly cut out the area you want and try to be careful and keep all the pieces together. So then once you've done that, you can go ahead and flip your pieces over. The reason why you're flipping it over is because you won't see any pencil marks or anything like that. And then you can go ahead and just kind of lay it down all together. And essentially just keep doing that until you have completely cut up the animal. And remember, just try to be as careful as you possibly can. I think it's also very important to remember that after you're done cutting up some of your pieces, you want to try kind of laying them out and composing them like they actually would look on the outline of the animal. This is just so you don't lose track of where that piece goes. If you even need to take a picture of how you were planning on cutting it up in the first place, you can always do that too. But if you're careful during this step to just keep all your pieces together and try to keep them in about the same place that they're supposed to be, then you shouldn't really have too much problems. Once that's done, you can move on to, in my opinion, the really fun part, which is basically where you're going to be able to start picking out which pieces you want to go where, essentially which colors you want to go where. Because remember, it's a patchwork animal, so it should be made up of several different colors. My only suggestion for this part is that I would try your very best not to have two colors that are the same next to each other. For different parts, so you want to try kind of spacing out your colors as best that you can. But like I said, there's not really a right or a wrong way to do this. Another thing to note too is that if there are any pieces that have jagged edges, or maybe you didn't completely cut it perfectly well, this is your time to go ahead and smooth out some of those extra little bits or edges on your papers. You can play around with how you want to arrange them, try and experiment with seeing which colors look the best where, because it will affect the final piece a little bit. So just, keep playing around with it until you find a color setup that you like. Once you've done that and you feel like your pieces look pretty good, then you want to go ahead and grab some Elmer's glue. You can use a glue stick too if you want, but I personally decided that I would use liquid glue just because I feel like it would kind of help the pieces stick a little bit better. So you don't want to use a ton of glue for this. Again, just try to lightly outline the edges, a little bit in the middle. But remember, again, you don't want to overdo it with the glue. From here on out, it's basically just kind of like putting together a puzzle because you're following along that pencil outline that you had done earlier. So it's basically just trying to make all of the pieces fit as well as they possibly can together inside of that outline. One thing to note is that you may find as you're doing this that some pieces are just a little bit too big, or they're maybe just a little bit too tiny, and that's okay. Not a really big deal. It just naturally happens. Sometimes when you're outlining your animal, you might accidentally make a part a little bit too big or a little bit too small when you're cutting it out, and that's kind of expected. It happens. If you need to overlap some of your shapes on top of one another in case some of them are too big, then feel free to do that. That's anything that will basically make it look better for you is what I would suggest doing. And even if you have a little bit of extra white space that's left around some of your pieces, I personally don't think that it takes away from how it looks in the end. I still think that it ends up looking pretty cool. So if you're worried about that, I wouldn't fret over it too much. As you're gluing down, do your best to make sure that none of the pieces are flying off at all and that it's all pretty secure. At this point, I would personally let it dry a little bit. Just because if you want to go back in and erase any areas, you don't want to accidentally start erasing some glue because then that'll cause like kind of an ugly smudge. So I would let it dry a little bit and then go back in, and if you see any extra little pencil marks from that outline that you did earlier, go ahead and just erase those off. As a side note, in case you hadn't already figured out by now, one of the reasons why I had you trace your animal backwards from the way that you wanted is because as you were gluing down the sides that had your pencil marks on them. So you didn't really have to go back through and try to erase anything extra. That's the reason why I had you do that, just as a side note. Once you've finished erasing, you're pretty happy with how it looks, then voila, your patchwork animal is complete. So now the next thing is that, one, you could leave it the way that it is, or if you would like, you can take some of those extra pieces that you made earlier and you could even make a different version of it. For example, when I was making my wolf, I made 2 different versions. I mean, you already have the pieces cut out, so in my opinion, it's kind of like a why not. You could even experiment with putting some of the same animals on the same page, or you could even decorate some of them if you really wanted to. With like marker on top of it. There's a lot of different ways that you could add on to this. So just keep that in mind and have a good time with it. I would love to see what you all come up with. So please send it to me. And I hope you have an awesome week. Okay, bye.